They told you the story everyone hears. Work hard, stay disciplined, and someday you'll make it. They said if you wake up early, grind longer, and stay consistent, success will eventually find you. But deep down, you know something doesn't add up. You've done everything right. You've worked yourself to exhaustion, followed the rules, stayed loyal to the process, and yet, the results never seem to match the effort. Meanwhile, someone your age is already running a company, traveling the world, or living the life you thought hard work would buy you. So what's going on? Why does effort seem irrelevant? Because the system was never built to reward effort, it was built to reward control. The game you were told to play isn't about labor, it's about leverage. It's about understanding the invisible structures that move society. Hard work is a noble myth designed to keep most people busy, while a few learn to shape the rules themselves. Think about it. If hard work was the path to power, construction workers would run the world. But they don't, because money doesn't flow to sweat, it flows to strategy. It moves toward those who understand timing, perception, and influence. Most people never realize this because they're too busy playing inside systems designed by others. They think they're working toward success, when in reality, they're maintaining someone else's empire. It's a hard truth to face, but understanding it is the first step to escaping the trap. You see, there's a hidden code behind every fortune, a Machiavellian logic that governs who rises and who stays stuck. The ones who master it don't work harder. They work structurally. They build machines of wealth, networks of influence, and ecosystems that multiply their every move. Meanwhile, the rest keep trading hours for dollars, hours that never come back. This is the psychological divide between workers and builders. Workers obey the system, builders create it. Workers chase income, builders design infrastructure. The difference isn't intelligence, it's perception. One sees the world as a marketplace of labor, the other sees it as a chessboard of leverage. And here's the first rule of that game: never play someone else's. The rich don't fight for positions, they create them. They don't wait for opportunities, they manufacture them. Every empire, from Amazon to ancient Rome, began with someone who realized that control, not effort, creates wealth. Control over your time, control over emotion, control over how others perceive you. That's where most people lose. Emotional instability. They react instead of calculating. They crave approval instead of understanding psychology. But power rewards those who master themselves first. Neuroscience confirms it. People who delay gratification, who can regulate emotion and tolerate uncertainty, outperform those who rely on brute persistence. Because emotional regulation is the gateway to strategic vision. The Machiavellian mind doesn't waste energy fighting noise. It studies it. It looks for the leverage points hidden inside chaos and acts with surgical precision. It doesn't need to be faster. It needs to be smarter. Here's what most don't realize. Wealth isn't about accumulation. It's about control. Money is simply the metric by which society measures who directs attention, systems, and behavior. Those who understand this stop asking, "How can I make more?" and start asking, "How can I design something that makes more for me?" That's why the powerful own platforms, while the rest post on them. They own banks, while others borrow from them. They don't sell their time, they sell the structure that uses time efficiently. Schools will never teach this. They weren't designed to. Schools manufacture predictability, obedient citizens, not empire builders. From the moment you're graded, you're being conditioned to seek permission, permission to speak, to act, to advance. The result? A society of rule followers who confuse compliance with competence. The true architects of power operate outside that frame. They use obedience as a tool, not a lifestyle. They write the rules that others feel proud to follow. And here's the cruel brilliance of the system. It rewards just enough to keep you chasing, but never enough to free you. The paycheck keeps you surviving, not thriving. The promotion feels like progress, but it's just a deeper level of captivity. Every hour spent earning for someone else's vision reinforces their empire while numbing you to your own potential. It's not a conspiracy, it's design. Behavioral economics calls this the illusion of progress, the psychological trick where minimal rewards keep people running toward unattainable goals. The treadmill effect. And every system that benefits from your energy relies on this exact bias. But here's the shift, the moment of awakening. You don't escape by rebellion, you escape by architecture. You learn how the system works, then replicate it in your favor. You stop competing, you start constructing. The same tools used to control you, knowledge, perception, leverage, become your weapons for liberation. Because once you see the machinery, you realize it can be rebuilt. The mind is the prototype. Every empire first existed as an idea before it became a structure. The psychological foundation comes first: strategy before success, control before cash. And that's why most fail. They try to act before they think. If you've ever felt stuck, despite working hard, you're not lazy. You're just operating on a code designed to limit your moves. You've been told to grind while the architects design. But the moment you decode how leverage works, your entire perception changes. You stop seeing walls, you start seeing patterns. You stop chasing approval, you start building systems. And that's where real wealth begins, not in labor, but in awareness. Because once you understand how the game functions, you stop playing by their rules. You start writing your own. The truth is, power doesn't shout, it whispers. It's quiet, patient, deliberate. Those who truly understand it don't announce their ambition. They plant it, nurture it, and let others mistake their stillness for passivity. But stillness is not inaction, it's calculation. You don't need to destroy the system, you just need to stop being controlled by it. Because when you understand the psychology of control, you can rebuild your environment around your advantage. And that's exactly how every modern empire was born, not through chaos, but through clarity. They call it ruthless, they call it manipulative, but to the strategist, it's simply truth. In a world ruled by emotion, logic is rebellion. The Machiavellian money code isn't about greed, it's about mastery. Mastery over time, over emotion, over perception. When you understand that, you stop running after success and start magnetizing it. Because power doesn't chase, it attracts. The average person believes success comes from pushing harder, that the longer you grind, the more you'll gain. But look closer at those who rise quietly, the empire builders, the architects of influence, and you'll see something different. They don't run faster, they position better. They understand that life isn't a race, it's a map. And maps aren't won through speed, they're conquered through strategy. That's the second law of the Machiavellian code. Never chase, attract. Chasing creates desperation. Attraction creates gravity. And gravity is the invisible force that bends opportunity toward you. In psychology, there's something called signal theory. It's the idea that everything you do sends a signal. Your words, your tone, your silence, your posture. Desperation signals weakness. Confidence signals control. The powerful understand this deeply. They move slowly, not because they lack urgency, but because urgency is a poor man's game. Power is calm. Control is quiet. The loudest voice in the room usually belongs to the person who fears being unheard. But the silent one, the one who doesn't need validation, commands the room without speaking. Because in the economy of influence, scarcity equals authority. Think of two entrepreneurs. One works 18-hour days, flooding social media with proof of how hard he hustles. The other speaks rarely, but every time he does, people listen. He doesn't advertise his value, he embodies it. Which one do investors chase? Always the second, because humans are wired to pursue confidence, not noise. This is where neuroscience meets strategy. The human brain is tuned to detect dominance through subtle cues, eye contact, stillness, tone. We evolved to respect those who appear certain, even when that certainty is an illusion. That's why perception becomes power long before performance does. You don't need to prove your worth. You need to design how it's perceived. That's what the wealthy do. They construct narratives around themselves. They control their myth. They let others believe in their inevitability until it becomes true. It's not deception, it's psychological leverage. And leverage always beats labor. Every single time. Banks prove this daily. They don't earn money, they lend it. They make their capital work while they sleep. Social media platforms, they don't create content. They monetize yours. That's the blueprint. Systems over sweat. The person who controls the structure always wins over the person who fills it. That's the third law. Leverage over labor. You can work yourself into the ground and still stay broke because effort alone doesn't scale. Systems do. Influence does. The poor use time. The rich use systems. The poor chase every dollar. The rich build structures that multiply dollars. The poor think in hours. The rich think in frameworks. That's not arrogance, it's design. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Leverage isn't evil. It's neutral. It's just power expressed through understanding. Politicians use emotional leverage to win votes. Influencers use attention leverage to sell products. CEOs use operational leverage to build companies. Investors use financial leverage to buy assets. The ones who demonize leverage are usually those who've never learned how to use it. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote that the ruler must learn how not to be good. In modern terms, that means learning to see beyond moral conditioning, to understand that influence itself isn't moral or immoral. It simply is. What matters is whether you wield it consciously or unconsciously. Take perception. In today's world, it's the ultimate form of leverage. A $5 product can sell for $500 if it carries meaning. People don't buy objects, they buy identity. They buy what the object says about them. That's neuroscience again. Our brains are wired for narrative, not logic. Meaning triggers motivation more powerfully than truth ever could. The elites understand this. They sell stories, not goods. Luxury isn't leather and stitching, it's belonging and admiration. They've learned to convert perception into profit. And you can, too. You already have leverage within reach. Your knowledge, your attention, your skills, your relationships, these are all forms of capital. Most people just never refine them into assets. They waste what could have been power by scattering focus. But the Machiavellian thinker consolidates it. He turns knowledge into systems, relationships into alliances, and attention into currency. Let me show you how leverage transforms a life. There were two employees at the same corporation. The first spent 20 years doing his job, clocking in, clocking out, waiting for recognition. The second, younger and less experienced, noticed inefficiencies in how the company worked. Instead of complaining, he studied them. 6 months later, he built a small automation tool that solved one of those inefficiencies. When he left, the same company that ignored him became his first client, paying him 6 figures for what he created. The first man worked for money. The second designed a system that made money work for him. That's the divide. That's the code. But here's what separates the truly powerful from the rest. They combine leverage with timing. Timing isn't luck, it's strategic patience. Most people fail not because they lack opportunity, but because they act too soon or too late. They rush when they should observe, and they hesitate when they should strike. Patience, in this context, isn't passive. It's active awareness. It's studying the board while others are moving blindly. It's the predator's stillness before the perfect strike. The Machiavellian mind knows that speed without direction is chaos. Impulse is the enemy of influence. Look at history's empire builders. Musk visualized reusable rockets years before the world cared. Bezos invested in cloud infrastructure when most still thought online retail was the endgame. These weren't lucky guesses. They were bets placed through long-term vision rooted in patience, not panic. The human brain, however, resists patience. Dopamine rewards immediacy. We crave progress, signals, notifications, praise, instant results. That's why the crowd can't play the empire game. They're neurologically wired for short-term pleasure, while the rulers of the world train their brains for long-term control. So ask yourself, are you chasing dopamine or designing dominion? Because the empire game doesn't reward motion, it rewards calculation. The short game gives you excitement. The long game gives you empires. And that's the paradox. The longer you can wait, the faster you grow. This is why true power always looks slow. It's never frantic. The powerful understand that by doing less with more precision, they amplify their results infinitely. Patience is leverage in disguise. So when you see chaos, don't panic. Study it. Chaos is the field where emotional players lose their composure and where logical players gain control. Remember this. Every time the world panics, someone calm is profiting. Because money and influence always flow to whoever controls emotion. This is not conspiracy. It's cognitive reality. Behavioral scientists have proven it again and again. Emotion drives the market, not logic. The Machiavellian simply uses that fact consciously, while others remain enslaved to it. That's why the crowd reacts while the builder calculates. The crowd spends to feel better. The builder invests to gain control. The crowd consumes stories. The builder writes them. And in every age, from Roman emperors to Silicon Valley CEOs, that same law defines the few who command the many. The Machiavellian code is not about wealth for its own sake. It's about the ability to shape your environment through structure, emotion, and perception. Once you master that, luck stops existing. You become the architect of what others call chance. That's the foundation of real freedom, not escaping the system, but designing your own within it. Power is not seized, it's engineered. Every empire from kingdoms to corporations was built through design, not force. The sword may conquer territory, but only strategy sustains it. Real power doesn't come from domination. It comes from the quiet mastery of systems that make others depend on you. Dependency is the hidden currency of control. You can't rule through fear forever. Fear fades, but dependency endures. When people need what you control, your product, your network, your insight, they will protect your position for you. That's the real secret behind dynasties and modern billionaires alike. They make themselves indispensable. Google didn't dominate search by being loved. It did so by becoming necessary. Apple didn't create customers, it created believers. The political elite don't command loyalty, they design dependency. That's the next law of the code. Create structures that others can't live without. When you study history, you'll see this everywhere. Rome's genius wasn't just its legions, it was its roads, aqueducts, and trade systems. Whoever controlled infrastructure controlled destiny. The same is true now. The new aqueducts are digital platforms, algorithms, and attention channels. The ones who build them shape culture itself. Most people live inside those structures, never realizing they can be built, owned, or rewritten. But once you see it, you can never unsee it. The powerful don't compete in crowded arenas. They create new games entirely. When others are fighting for market share, they quietly build ecosystems where the competition becomes irrelevant. Uber didn't fight taxis. It rewrote transportation. Netflix didn't compete with cable. It redefined how attention flows. That's how Machiavellian builders think. Why fight for a seat when you can build the table? And the blueprint always starts with control points. A control point is any mechanism that shapes behavior. It can be tangible, like property, capital, or patents, or intangible, like belief, narrative, or data. The deeper your control points, the less you have to compete. You're not playing on the board anymore. You are the board. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that men must be either won over or destroyed. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. If you can't dominate the structure, integrate it. If you can't destroy the opponent, make them rely on you. That's why the shrewdest move isn't confrontation, it's absorption. In business, it's called acquisition. In politics, alliance. In psychology, it's persuasion. The form changes, but the principle remains. Control flows to whoever defines the frame. And here's the paradox. Those who appear cooperative often hold the deepest power, because cooperation builds trust, and trust opens access. Once you have access, you can influence. Once you influence, you can steer direction without appearing to. That's how power sustains itself, invisibly. The moment power becomes visible, it becomes vulnerable. The masses attack what they can see, never realizing the real rulers are behind the scenes designing the system, not running it. True power doesn't lead armies, it funds them. It doesn't argue, it advises. It doesn't need to command, it simply positions. That's the essence of Machiavellian mastery. Not aggression, but architecture. Let's strip it down to modern terms. If you control capital, you control action. If you control attention, you control belief. If you control data, you control prediction. And whoever controls prediction controls the future. That's why the next era of wealth isn't about products. It's about perception and prediction. The ones who understand human behavior at scale, how people think, buy, and vote, hold more leverage than those with factories or land ever did. Behavioral data is the new gold. Narratives are the new weapons. Influence is the new empire. And yet, most still chase outdated trophies, titles, degrees, promotions, symbols of success, handed out by the very system that feeds on their ambition. The powerful build leverage. The powerless seek permission. Permission is the modern leash. You're trained to ask for it from childhood. Permission to speak, to try, to earn, to lead. But the Machiavellian refuses it entirely. He doesn't ask to play. He designs the game so no one can exclude him. That's not rebellion. That's evolution. Because the future won't belong to the most intelligent or the hardest working. It will belong to those who own the mechanism that others depend on. And that mechanism doesn't have to be global. It just has to be essential to someone's world. Control is fractal. A small node of influence, scaled properly, becomes an empire in miniature. Here's the formula the masses never learn. Influence times infrastructure equals irreplaceability. Once you become irreplaceable, wealth follows automatically. Not because you're lucky, but because the system now needs you more than you need it. That's the quiet liberation the Machiavellian seeks. Not money for comfort, but money for sovereignty. Sovereignty of thought, sovereignty of time, sovereignty of direction. To the average mind, that sounds abstract, but to the strategist, it's everything. Because the ultimate form of wealth isn't ownership, it's freedom from consequence, the ability to make moves without fear. And that level of control only comes from understanding one truth. Every structure, no matter how powerful, is built by people, and people can be studied, mapped, influenced. That's where the next part of the code begins. The psychology of control. Control begins in the mind, yours and theirs. The moment you can shape perception, behavior follows automatically. Because humans don't act from logic, they act from the stories they believe. Control those stories, and you control reality. That's why every form of power, political, financial, social, rests on psychological leverage. Machiavelli understood it centuries ago. Men are driven by two things, fear and interest. Modern neuroscience has simply confirmed it. The human brain is reward-driven and fear-averse. Whoever masters those two levers, pleasure and pain, writes the script. Everyone else follows. But here's where most people fail. They try to manipulate instead of engineer. Manipulation is crude. It creates resistance. Engineering influence is subtle. It makes compliance feel voluntary. That's the first rule of psychological control. Make obedience feel like choice. When people believe they're acting from free will, their defenses vanish. They internalize your agenda as their own. Advertisers use this every day. They don't sell products, they sell identity. Buy this, become that. The illusion of autonomy hides the architecture of persuasion. But there's a deeper layer. True Machiavellian control doesn't require deception. It requires understanding. The more you understand what people want to believe, the easier it is to make reality align with that belief. Because humans aren't seeking truth, they're seeking coherence. They want their world to make sense. If you give them a coherent story, they'll protect it like a religion. That's why the second rule is, never fight beliefs, redirect them. You don't destroy conviction, you absorb it. You don't argue with emotion, you channel it. That's how movements, markets, and ideologies are steered. The crowd doesn't need new facts, they need a new frame. Frames are invisible boundaries that define how information is interpreted. For example, call attacks, a contribution, and resistance drops. Call surveillance, security, and people volunteer their data. Nothing factual changes, but the perception does, and perception decides behavior. That's the third rule. He who controls the frame controls the fight. Frames exist everywhere, in media headlines, corporate cultures, social hierarchies. Most people operate inside them unconsciously, never realizing they can be rewritten. Once you see the frame, you gain leverage, because frames determine meaning, and meaning determines action. Control the meaning, and you don't have to control the people. This is the essence of soft power, the kind that lasts. Hard power demands compliance through force. Soft power generates compliance through belief. It's quieter, cleaner, and infinitely more stable. The world's most powerful figures rarely order anyone to do anything. They simply align incentives, control narratives, and let psychology do the rest. That's what makes the Machiavellian code dangerous in the wrong hands, but liberating in the right ones. Because you can use it not only to influence others, but to free yourself from being influenced. The most important battlefield isn't out there, it's inside you. Every day, media, algorithms, and institutions compete for your mental bandwidth. They implant urgency, fear, envy, and distraction. Their goal isn't to destroy you, it's to direct you. If they control your focus, they control your future. That's why the true student of power practices mental sovereignty. He studies his triggers, his biases, his emotional responses. He recognizes when fear is being weaponized against him. He knows that outrage is the easiest form of control because angry people don't think, they react. So he cultivates neutrality, not apathy, but clarity, the ability to observe without immediate judgment, to watch the crowd panic and simply think, what's the leverage here? That's the psychological discipline of the builder: emotional detachment, intellectual empathy, and strategic timing. Emotional detachment lets you see clearly. Empathy lets you predict human behavior. Timing lets you strike without resistance. Together, they form the triad of control. Imagine you're in negotiation. Most people talk, justify, explain. The Machiavellian watches. Silence becomes a tool. People rush to fill it with information, revealing motives, insecurities, and leverage points. When you understand human discomfort with uncertainty, you weaponize patience. That's the fourth rule. The one who stays calm controls the outcome. Because calmness isn't weakness, it's psychological dominance. It signals that you already know the result. And humans, driven by uncertainty aversion, unconsciously align with certainty. This is why real power doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be inevitable. The Machiavellian mindset doesn't seek attention. It commands it through presence. That presence comes from inner stillness, the kind that cannot be shaken by praise or criticism. The crowd worships both, but the strategist transcends them. When you reach that state, you stop being reactive to life and start designing it. Because control isn't about domination, it's about direction. It's about the ability to move the world subtly, almost imperceptibly, toward your intended outcome, without noise, without conflict, without wasted motion. And that's where the code becomes transformation. Once you understand the psychology of control, you no longer chase power, you become it. You stop seeking advantage and start radiating it. That's the point where the builder evolves into the architect, the one who doesn't just win the game, he redefines what winning means. Control begins in the mind, yours and theirs. The moment you can shape perception, behavior follows automatically. Because humans don't act from logic, they act from the stories they believe. Control those stories, and you control reality. That's why every form of power, political, financial, social, rests on psychological leverage. Machiavelli understood it centuries ago. Men are driven by two things, fear and interest. Modern neuroscience simply proved it. The brain is reward-driven, fear-averse, and easily guided by whoever masters those two forces. But real mastery isn't manipulation, it's understanding. You don't force people, you frame them. The first law of control: make obedience feel like choice. The second: never fight beliefs, redirect them. The third: he who controls the frame controls the fight. Once you internalize these laws, you stop clashing with the world. You start orchestrating it. Every ad, every movement, every empire runs on these invisible levers. The wise use them consciously. The lost are used by them unconsciously. Most people think they make independent decisions, yet their desires were designed, their fears implanted, their reactions predicted. Freedom begins the moment you see that mechanism. Because once you recognize how attention, emotion, and perception are engineered, you reclaim them. You stop being a product of the system and start becoming its designer. You begin to notice how the world moves not chaotically, but predictably toward whoever maintains emotional control. That's the final rule. Calm is the highest currency of power. While others panic, you observe. While they argue, you calculate. While they chase, you attract. And in that stillness, everything bends quietly toward you. This is the Machiavellian money code in its purest form, not greed, not deceit, but structure. It's the art of designing your life with intention instead of instinct. It's the science of replacing emotion with architecture. When you understand this code, you stop working for power. You embody it. You become the architect, the one who builds systems of wealth, perception, and influence that outlive effort itself. And that is where the game ends. Not with noise, but with quiet mastery.